Well, folks, we got a crazy review here. Sire DENATHRIUS has been revealed, and it's totally bonkers. It's like a new Cthulhu, but even cooler in a lot of ways. We've also got a couple new location cards as well, but let's kick it off here with this new 10 mana 10/10 neutral legendary. Sire DENATHRIUS also has a lifesteal, battle cry, deal 6 damage amongst enemies, and then finally endlessly infuse 1, deal 1 more. So unlike most infused cards, which once they hit their infused trigger, they transform, they become a new version of that card and then stop upgrading, Sire DENATHRIUS is apparently going to upgrade over and over and over again. So you can take that base 6 damage that he's going to deal with that battle cry and pump it up. Every time a friendly minion dies while DENATHRIUS is in hand, that's going to increase by 1. So you kill off 10 friendly minions over the course of the game. By turn 10, your Sire DENATHRIUS is going to deal 16 damage amongst enemies. You know, maybe you get him up to 30. He might be able to one-shot your opponent. But here's the thing. I don't think you have to make DENATHRIUS good. He's got lifesteal as well, remember. So those pings, when they start firing off missiles from Sire DENATHRIUS, are also going to heal you. So that makes this a really powerful swing card. There will be instances where I think this is probably a lethal blow, and you use this to kill your opponent because they maybe only have a couple small minions. You've pumped this up to 15. They got 10 health. Boom, the game is over. I think there'll be other scenarios where you're quite okay just using this as a bit of a board clear stabilizer. Maybe you clear off some 3/3s on board, get a little chip damage, but also heal like 12 or 15 health in the meantime, and that's really important to help you stabilize if you're a little bit of a slower deck. In either case, really impactful card. Whether you use it defensively, offensively, somewhere in the middle, I think will be the case very often. I think it's going to be a really important big swing card when it hits the board. And to be honest, I don't think you have to pump up DENATHRIUS a ton for it to feel like an okay play. I think there will be instances where even if you top deck this, you're still sort of okay playing a 10/10 that's got like this Devouring Plague plus attached to its effect. Like, that's going to be really nice. And remember, he is a 10/10, so if he sticks around, that lifesteal becomes really problematic for your opponent in its own right, not to mention the immediate heal off the battle cry. So I think there will be board states and game states where top deck DENATHRIUS is fine. You're probably not excited about it, you're not pumped, but the floor on this card is still pretty reasonable. It's going to be okay sometimes. And then the ceiling for this card, I don't know if there is a ceiling. It's just insane when things go well and, you know, you have him early and you really pump him up. He's going to be absolutely bonkers on turn 10 in certain scenarios. Now, there is a question, of course, for this card for like deck fit, because you're probably going to want to run a bunch of minions to make DENATHRIUS good and worth it. But, you know, a deck that's like really minion based and really aggressive and fast might not want to go all the way to something like 10 mana. They may not want to wait till 10 mana to play their finisher. They may be a faster deck that has earlier finishers than DENATHRIUS, so that could be a little bit awkward for really aggressive decks. On the other side of things, decks that traditionally go to 10 mana and are happy to play for late game scenarios, so slower, grindier, controllier decks, might not have as many minions to pump up DENATHRIUS because they might have more spells and reactive cards that don't feed DENATHRIUS quite as efficiently. Now, there have been plenty of token decks in the past, particularly in Druid, that can go a little bit longer. They kind of just keep reloading in the mid game over and over again. A card like DENATHRIUS could fit really well into that package where you're making a board on 5, making a board on 7, making a board on 9, and then DENATHRIUS on 10 is like, okay, that was the final blow. Your opponent couldn't quite keep up. So that's a natural fit. But honestly, I think there will be a lot of decks that just run, you know, 5 to 10 minions, something like a Control Warrior we've seen recently. You know, they're just running a handful of minions in the deck naturally that they like anyway, that fit the game plan. Those are occasionally going to feed up a Sir DENATHRIUS pretty dang well, getting him up to, you know, 10, 15, maybe even 20 damage in best case scenarios. That makes this a really powerful tool. There realistically might even be combo decks that are specifically built around Sire DENATHRIUS, trying to, say, draw him really early in the game, you know, use some sort of tutor like in Druid to draw your highest cost card, and then just feed him with minion boards, maybe just small stuff you're happy to trade in, kind of keep your opponent at bay, and then boom, big combo finisher for Sire DENATHRIUS. So all in all, I think a lot of ways to slice this card, a lot of ways for it to work well, both in game states and in deck building. So to me, this looks like an instant classic. I think DENATHRIUS will get played a lot. All right, moving on here, we have the location for Paladin. It's the Great Hall. It's all about food and cooking and kitchens for Paladin. This is the dining room, apparently, and it's where all the Paladins hang out, I guess. It's a 2-mana location, 3 durability, And the effect is going to set a minion's attack and health to 3. So depending on whether you're using this on enemies or friendly minions, this can either be a debuff or a buff. Take your opponent's 8/8 and turn it into a 3/3. So it's not nearly as threatening. Or take your perhaps Silverhand Recruit in your Silverhand Recruit synergy deck that's been teased and turn your Silverhand Recruit into a 3/3. And you get to do that 3 times. So, if you're using this on recruits, it's maybe like a net 6/6 in stats, for instance. Or if you're using this to debuff your opponent's stuff, you could potentially net even more, all for a total of 2 cost. Now, we've seen this effect in the past in Paladin. There was like Sunkeeper Tarum who did this to the whole board. And then there was that other 3/4 minion whose name I absolutely cannot remember. But these effects have worked historically in Paladin. I will say I think this falls off a little bit in the modern era of Hearthstone. I don't feel like this does quite as much as it used to would have, because we sort of have naturally more mid-sized minions in many cases in Hearthstone these days. We don't have a lot of 8/8s floating around, and we do have a lot of like 3/3s and 4/4s and 3/5s and stat lines where this might not be as impactful. Even if you look at Paladin outside of Silverhand Recruits, a lot of their minions wouldn't stand to gain a ton here from the Great Hall buff. And if we look out across meta archetypes, not that many things get debuffed that effectively either. So I do think there's some meta fit challenges for this right now. So beyond that, there are the kind of general location problems I'm envisioning for most of these, where it's going to take 5 turns to get the full use case out of this card. That's a pretty long time for a card to make an impact. That said, slower control-y or Paladin decks can plop this down on 2. It's often like kind of a free turn or 2, early in the game, you got some spare mana floating around, and then make that investment for later. There's also the downside that your opponent kind of knows when this is on cooldown, so if they have like a big 8/8, they might just wait to play that until Great Hall's on cooldown to ensure that it has a turn to make an impact without being able to debuff it right away. That same time, though, you could use this as sort of a deterrent to say, like, okay, look, I know your deck's running big stuff. I'm going to plop down the Great Hall. I'm not going to use the ability, so it doesn't go on cooldown until you play your big thing. So that could be a little bit disruptive or countering your opponent's big plays in a lot of ways as well. So all in all, it's still really hard to get a read on these locations because we just haven't seen them in action yet in real live Hearthstone. That said, this one feels, again, okay, but not by any means excellent. So next up here, we have the Castle Kennels, the new 2-mana location for Hunter. This one's also 3 durability. This one's going to give a friendly minion +2 attack, and if it's a beast, it will give that minion rush. So a couple things I think you could do with this card. Number one, this could just be an aggressive card, just buffing up minions on board so they can hit face harder. A +2 attack can stack up when you're Hunter trying to kill your opponent with big damage. Alternatively, you could use this to gain some swing ability off of that rush aspect, particularly with cards like maybe Death Rattles that don't already have rush. You could use this to trade in a Death Rattle immediately, proc a positive Death Rattle effect as long as it is a beast. Now, I will say for many of the beasts in Hunter, they're already kind of baking in rush these days. You've got like the Ram and the Saber. Those already have rush and do their thing, so Castle Kennels may not really increment that game plan particularly well, but there could be other beast death battles that are a little bit more slow, passive. I mean, like a Mountain Bear, would you really want to give a Mountain Bear rush and trade it in? I'm not so sure, but maybe with a +2 attack, right, it just creates better trade scenarios anyway, so that you can trade up minions that otherwise wouldn't effectively trade up. So for those 2 game plans, I think the face kind of pressure game plan doesn't make a lot of sense to sacrifice 2 mana, sacrifice some potential tempo in exchange for like 6 damage over the course of 5 turns. I'm not sure that's going to really stack up and make a lot of sense for many decks. The kind of swing ability game plan might make more sense, but how many decks will actually need that? Is the rush bonus here really worth all that much? In combination with the +2 attack, it could be, but Hunter doesn't usually play especially well from behind or when trying to recover board states. They can, but it's not their strong suit. So would this card be enough to make that a strong suit? Or would the traditional archetypes and game plans we see for Hunter bear out instead and kind of leave this by the wayside? So again, I worry that, 5 turns here to unlock, I would say, moderately good effect. Maybe just an okay effect. I just don't really see how that one makes the cut. Sire DENATHRIUS is a 5-star card. Great Hall is a 3-star card. Castle Kennels is a 2-star card. And there you go. That wraps it up for this review. Really curious to hear everybody's thoughts on these cards. I know I've been a little hard on the locations. I don't mean to be. I'm just not really seeing the lines on most of these quite yet, but I'm curious if you have a great way to use Castle Kennels. Of course, share that in the comments below. Enlighten us all on why you think this one's going to be amazing. I'm curious to hear that thought for sure. That said, thanks so much as always for watching. Stay tuned for more card reviews, and until next time, game on.